Far beyond Earth, deep in the cold darkness of space, thousands of alien civilizations lived together under the rule of the Galactic Council. It was a place where the strongest empires made decisions about the future of the galaxy. Massive fleets guarded powerful worlds, and advanced species controlled trade, technology, and war. Among all these great civilizations, one small planet had recently caught their attention. That planet was Earth. On the large glowing screens inside the council chamber, a blue world slowly rotated. Oceans covered most of its surface, with scattered continents filled with billions of humans. To the powerful alien empires, Earth looked small, young, and weak. Many of them had watched humanity for decades, studying their technology, their politics, and their military power. What they saw made them laugh. Humans fought among themselves. Their ships were small compared to galactic warships. Their colonies outside Earth were few. To most alien commanders, humanity looked like a species that had entered space far too early. In the chamber, representatives from different alien empires quietly discussed the situation. Some believed Earth should simply be ignored. Others believed it could become useful as a trade partner. But one empire had a very different opinion. The Zereth Dominion was one of the most powerful military forces in the galaxy. Their fleets had conquered many star systems, and their commanders believed strength was the only rule that mattered. To them, Earth looked like an easy target. Their leader, a tall, armored alien with glowing red eyes, stood before the council display and studied the planet carefully. Reports from their scouts were simple and clear. Earth had no massive defense fleets, no giant orbital cannons, no large battle stations like other galactic powers. According to every scan and every report, the planet had almost no real protection. The Zereth commander spoke calmly, his voice echoing through the chamber. He said that humans were weak and divided, and that their world would fall in a single day if the Dominion decided to attack. Some council members remained silent, watching carefully. Others quietly agreed. A few even laughed. To them, the idea of humanity defending itself against a major galactic empire seemed almost impossible. Soon the discussion ended with a decision that would change everything. The Zereth Dominion would send a fleet to Earth. Officially, it was called an expansion operation. Unofficially, everyone knew it was simply an invasion. Across the galaxy, news of the coming attacks spread quickly. Many civilizations began watching with interest. Some expected to see humanity surrender without a fight. Others believed the humans might resist for a short time before losing. Very few believed Earth had any chance of survival. Weeks later, deep in space far from Earth, a massive fleet of Zereth warships gathered together. Thousands of dark metallic vessels floated in perfect formation. Their engines glowed with deep red light as power flowed through their weapons. These ships had destroyed many civilizations before. Their commanders were confident this mission would be the easiest conquest in their history. The fleet began its long journey toward the Sol System, the home of humanity. As the alien armada moved through the stars, their scanners constantly studied the system ahead of them. They watched Earth satellites, small patrol ships, and communication networks. Everything they saw only confirmed their beliefs. Humanity had technology, but it was not impressive compared to galactic standards. Their fleets were small. Their defenses were scattered. There were no signs of massive hidden armies or powerful battle stations. The Zereth commanders laughed when they reviewed the data. Some of them even argued about how quickly the war would end. One believed Earth would surrender within hours. Another said the humans might last a few days if they were stubborn. But none of them believed the planet could truly resist. Far away on Earth, however, the situation was very different. While the alien fleet moved closer through the darkness of space, deep underground command centers were quietly becoming active. Hidden bases beneath mountains and oceans received encrypted signals. Military officers gathered in silent rooms filled with glowing screens. The faces of human commanders were calm, serious, and focused. They had known this moment might come one day. For many years, humanity had studied the galaxy carefully. They had watched powerful alien empires rise and fall. They had seen how aggressive some species could be. Long ago, human leaders had made a secret decision. Instead of showing their full strength to the galaxy, they would hide it. They would appear smaller and weaker than they truly were. It was a dangerous plan, but it gave humanity something very valuable. Time. Time to prepare. Time to build. Time to create something the galaxy had never seen before. As the Zereth fleet approached the outer edges of the Sol system, their scanners suddenly detected strange signals near the gas giants Jupiter and Saturn. At first, the readings were weak and unclear. The alien technicians believed they were simply background radiation or natural disturbances. But the signals slowly grew stronger. Massive energy levels began rising in the darkness near the giant planets. Inside one of the Zereth command ships, an officer stared at his console in confusion. The energy readings were unlike anything he had seen before. Something enormous was powering up in the outer system. Meanwhile, millions of kilometers away, hidden deep inside the shadow of Jupiter's moons, ancient structures slowly came to life. Gigantic shipyards that had remained silent for decades began activating. Huge mechanical arms moved across colossal metal shapes, resting in the darkness. Lights flickered on across surfaces kilometers long. Engines the size of cities began warming up after years of silence. Slowly, silently, the first of humanity's secret guardians awakened. These were not ordinary ships. They were something far greater. Massive war machines built far from the eyes of the galaxy. Ships designed not just to defend Earth, but to dominate entire battlefields. As power flowed through their systems, the darkness around Jupiter began to move. Enormous silhouettes drifted forward, too large for most scanners to measure correctly. Back on Earth, in a quiet underground command room, a human admiral watched the incoming reports. On the large screen in front of him, the alien invasion fleet continued its confident approach toward Earth. The admiral folded his hands calmly and spoke in a quiet voice. He said that the galaxy believed humanity was weak because humans had allowed them to believe it. The aliens had looked at Earth and seen only what humans wanted them to see. Small fleets, simple defenses, a young civilization that could easily be conquered. But the truth had always been hidden in the darkness of their own solar system. As the Zereth fleet moved closer to Earth, the first massive human warship slowly emerged from the shadows near Jupiter. Its engines ignited with deep blue light, and its enormous armored hull reflected the distant sunlight. The age of silence was over. Humanity's dreadnought fleet had begun to wake up. The Zereth Dominion fleet moved deeper into the Sol system with absolute confidence. Thousands of warships traveled together in perfect formation, their dark metallic hulls reflecting the distant light of the sun. The commanders inside the fleet believed the mission was almost finished before it had even begun. To them, Earth was nothing more than a small and poorly protected world. Their scanners continued to analyze the system again and again, but the results always appeared the same. They saw small human patrol ships, scattered satellites, and weak defensive stations around Earth and Mars. Nothing they detected looked dangerous. Inside the main Zereth flagship, the fleet commander calmly watched the tactical display floating in front of him. The holographic image showed the entire Sol system. Tiny markers represented human ships and stations, and compared to the massive alien fleet, they looked insignificant. Several Zereth officers stood nearby, studying the same display. One of them spoke with quiet amusement, saying that the humans had made a mistake by entering the wider galaxy before they were ready. Another officer replied that perhaps humanity believed diplomacy would protect them. The commander simply shook his head. In the Zereth Dominion, weakness was an invitation for conquest. As the fleet continued its approach, long-range scanners began detecting new signals again from the outer regions of the system. The strange energy spikes near Jupiter and Saturn were growing stronger. At first, the Zereth technicians believed the readings were natural, perhaps caused by storms inside the gas giants or unusual magnetic activity. but the pattern slowly became more organized. Energy pulses appeared in steady intervals, almost like a heartbeat, slowly growing stronger. One technician carefully adjusted the sensors and focused on the signals again. What he saw made him pause in confusion. Massive shapes were beginning to move near the orbit of Jupiter. The readings were unclear and distorted, as if something extremely large was interfering with the scanners. The technician quickly reported the discovery to the bridge officers. When the data appeared on the main display, the Zereth commander frowned slightly. The shapes were enormous, but the readings were unstable. It was difficult to measure their exact size or distance. Some officers believed they might be natural objects like asteroids or drifting ice fields. Others were not so certain. The commander ordered a small group of fast scout ships to investigate the anomaly. Several sleek Zereth vessels immediately separated from the main fleet and accelerated toward the outer system. Their engines burned bright red as they rushed toward Jupiter. Meanwhile, far away on Earth, millions of people had already heard the news. The alien fleet had entered the solar system. Governments across the planet were broadcasting emergency alerts. Satellites tracked the movement of the invasion force as it slowly moved closer to the inner planets. On the surface, cities remained calm, but the tension was everywhere. People watched the skies, wondering what would happen next. Deep beneath the mountains of North America, inside one of humanity's largest underground command centers, the Global Defense Council was fully active. Rows of officers studied large holographic displays showing the position of every alien ship. The massive Zereth fleet looked overwhelming compared to the visible human forces. But unlike the aliens, the human commanders did not look frightened. They looked patient. An older admiral stood quietly at the center of the room. His uniform was simple, but every officer in the chamber respected him. He had spent most of his life preparing for this exact moment. Years ago, he had helped design the secret plan that humanity had hidden from the rest of the galaxy. The admiral watched the incoming data from the outer system carefully. Reports confirmed that the hidden shipyards near Jupiter and Saturn were now fully active. Ancient construction platforms that had remained silent for decades were moving again. Massive reactors were coming online, and giant docking structures were releasing ships that had waited in darkness for many years. The admiral finally spoke in a calm voice. He ordered the next stage of the defense protocol to begin. Across the solar system, secure communication signals traveled faster than light through hidden relay networks. These signals carried one simple command. The command the human engineers and commanders had prepared for generations. The command that would wake the guardians of Earth. In the shadow of Jupiter, enormous mechanical gates slowly opened. From inside the massive shipyards, gigantic armored vessels began moving forward. Each one was larger than any warship the galaxy had ever recorded. Their hulls were kilometers long, covered in thick armor and heavy weapon systems. Huge engine arrays slowly ignited, filling the darkness with a cold blue glow. These ships had remained hidden for decades, while humanity quietly expanded its secret fleet. They were the result of centuries of planning, research, and construction. Humanity had not built them quickly or carelessly. Every system had been designed for one purpose: to protect Earth against enemies far stronger than themselves. Back near the approaching Zereth fleet, the scout ships finally reached the outer region near Jupiter. Their sensors immediately began scanning the strange objects in the distance. At first, the readings appeared impossible. The shapes were far too large to be normal spacecraft. Some were several kilometers long. Others were even larger. The Zereth scouts tried to send the information back to the main fleet, but interference filled their communication channels. Something powerful was blocking their signals. Then, one of the scouts detected sudden movement in the darkness ahead. A massive object slowly drifted out from behind one of Jupiter's moons. Its armored surface reflected faint sunlight, revealing the enormous structure of a warship unlike anything the scouts had ever seen. The vessel was gigantic. Its central hull alone was larger than several alien cruisers combined. Huge weapon arrays lined its surface, Its engines glowed with steady blue power. The Zereth pilots stared in disbelief as the ship moved silently through space. Before they could react, more shapes began appearing across their sensors. Dozens of enormous vessels were emerging from the shadows around Jupiter. One scout pilot whispered in shock as the scale of the discovery became clear. These were not natural objects. They were warships, human warships. Back on Earth, the human admiral watched the same data appear on his display. The first wave of dreadnoughts had successfully awakened. Slowly, he nodded to the officers around him. For many years, humanity had allowed the galaxy to believe they were weak and unprepared. They had allowed alien empires to underestimate them. Now that illusion was about to end. Far out in the darkness near Jupiter, the first dreadnought fully activated its main engines. The enormous vessel turned slowly toward the inner system where the Zereth invasion fleet was approaching. One by one, more dreadnoughts followed. The silence of the outer solar system was beginning to break. Humanity's hidden fleet was finally entering the war. The Discovery near Jupiter quickly reached the Zereth Dominion fleet. At first, the commanders believed it was a mistake in the scanners. The reports coming from the scout ships sounded impossible. According to the data, dozens of enormous human warships were hiding in the outer solar system. These ships were far larger than normal military vessels. Some of them were so massive that the scanners struggled to measure their full size. Inside the Zereth flagship, the fleet commander stared at the new tactical display with growing confusion. The holographic map of the Sol system now showed several large markers near Jupiter. Each marker represented an unknown object that had suddenly become active. The commander slowly crossed his arms while his officers spoke quietly around him. One officer insisted the readings must be incorrect. Another suggested the humans had somehow hidden a few experimental ships. But even that explanation sounded weak. No young civilization could secretly build warships of that scale without the galaxy noticing. The Zereth commander finally ordered the scout ships to move closer and send clearer scans. The small alien vessels carefully approached the giant shapes drifting near Jupiter. As they moved forward, their sensors began to return clearer images. The data confirmed what the pilots were already seeing with their own eyes. These were warships. Massive armored warships built with technology far beyond what the aliens expected from humanity. The largest ship slowly rotated in space, revealing its enormous structure. Its surface was covered with thick layered armor plates and powerful weapon turrets. Large energy emitters were mounted along the sides of the hull. The engine section at the rear of the vessel was almost the size of a small city. Blue energy flowed across the massive thrusters as the ship prepared to move. The Zereth scout pilots were silent as they watched the giant vessel wake up. One of them whispered that this single ship looked strong enough to fight an entire fleet. Moments later, more shapes appeared from the shadows. Dozens of additional warships slowly emerged from hidden positions around Jupiter's moons. Some drifted out of massive docking structures built deep inside asteroid fields. Others powered up from hidden stations orbiting the gas giant itself. The scouts suddenly realized they were not looking at a small secret fleet. They were looking at an entire hidden armada. Back on Earth, the Human Defense Command continued monitoring every movement in space. In the underground command center, the large central screen displayed the positions of both the alien fleet and the newly awakened dreadnoughts. Human officers moved quickly but calmly as they processed the incoming data. For them, this moment was not surprising. It was something they had prepared for most of their lives. The same admiral who had been watching the battle from the beginning stood near the main display. His face remained calm as reports continued to arrive from the outer system. The first wave of dreadnoughts was fully active now. More ships were preparing to leave the hidden shipyards near Saturn as well. A younger officer, standing nearby, finally asked the question that many people across Earth were asking at that same moment. How had humanity built such enormous warships without anyone in the galaxy discovering them? The admiral looked at the officer for a moment before answering. He explained that humanity had learned an important lesson very early in their exploration of space. The galaxy was not peaceful. It was filled with powerful empires, ancient rivalries, and species that believed strength was the only rule that mattered. When humans first detected alien civilizations many decades earlier, they realized something dangerous. Compared to the older empires, humanity was still small and vulnerable. If they showed their full capabilities too early, they might attract enemies they were not ready to fight. So the leaders of Earth made a difficult decision. Humanity would hide its true strength. Instead of building huge fleets near Earth where alien scouts might see them, they secretly moved their largest projects to the outer regions of the solar system. Giant construction platforms were built in the shadows of Jupiter, Saturn, and beyond. These locations were far from the main trade routes used by alien civilizations. They were quiet, distant, and perfect for secret construction. Over many decades, thousands of engineers, scientists, and workers helped build something the galaxy had never seen before. The Dreadnought program was humanity's greatest secret. These ships were not designed like normal warships. They were designed as space fortresses. Each dreadnought carried enough firepower to fight multiple enemy fleets at once. Their armor was layered with experimental materials that could survive the strongest known weapons. Their reactors produced enormous amounts of energy, allowing their weapons and shields to operate at levels most civilizations considered impossible. Even more important, the ships were built slowly and carefully. Humanity never rushed the project. Each dreadnought was tested, upgraded, and improved over many years before the next one was completed. By the time the first alien scouts began studying Earth, the construction program was already hidden deep in the outer system. To the rest of the galaxy, humanity looked like a small civilization still learning how to survive in space. That illusion had worked perfectly. Alien empires saw Earth as a minor power with limited military strength. None of them imagined that a massive fleet of dreadnoughts was quietly growing in the darkness of the Sol system. Now, far from Earth, the results of that secret plan were finally appearing. Near Jupiter, the first group of dreadnoughts finished powering up their main systems. Massive engine arrays ignited, pushing the giant ships slowly forward. Their movement was slow but unstoppable, like mountains drifting through space. The Zereth scout ships quickly began retreating as they watched the enormous vessels change course toward the inner system. The pilots knew they had discovered something their commanders had never expected. When the scout ships finally managed to send their full report back to the main fleet, silence filled the Zereth command bridge. The tactical display now showed dozens of gigantic human warships moving toward them from the outer system. The alien officers could no longer deny what they were seeing. Humanity had hidden an entire armada inside their own solar system, and those ships were now coming to fight. Back on Earth, the Admiral quietly watched the dreadnought fleet begin its long journey toward the approaching invasion force. For decades, the ships had remained silent guardians in the darkness. Now their purpose had finally arrived. Humanity had spent generations preparing for the day when someone in the galaxy would test their strength. That day had come, and the galaxy was about to learn that Earth had never been defenseless. The Zereth Dominion fleet continued moving toward the inner planets of the Sol system, but the confidence that once filled their command ships was slowly fading. The new reports from the scout vessels had changed everything. The alien commanders could no longer pretend that the strange signals near Jupiter were harmless. Clear images now showed enormous human warships leaving hidden shipyards and moving toward the battlefield. Inside the Zereth flagship, the tactical display had been updated with the latest data. Red markers represented the Dominion fleet, while large blue markers showed the newly discovered human vessels. The difference in size between the markers was shocking. Each blue symbol represented a ship far larger than anything the Zereth had expected to face. Officers gathered around the display in uneasy silence. Some still believed the humans were attempting a desperate bluff. Others were beginning to realize the situation might be far more serious. The fleet commander stood quietly while studying the map. His expression remained calm, but his glowing eyes were focused carefully on the advancing shapes coming from the outer system. The humans had clearly hidden something important from the galaxy. But the Zereth Dominion was not an empire that feared new weapons or large ships. They had conquered many worlds before, and their fleets had destroyed powerful enemies in the past. After a long moment, the commander finally gave new orders. The fleet would not retreat. Instead, they would move forward and prepare for combat. Hundreds of Zereth warships quickly adjusted their formation. Defensive cruisers moved to the front, while heavy battleships powered up their weapons. Fighter carriers began launching waves of small attack craft. The Dominion had not come all this way to leave empty-handed. If humanity wanted war, they would have it. Far away near Jupiter, the human dreadnought fleet continued its slow and powerful advance. The largest vessel in the formation moved at the center of the group like a silent giant. Its armored hull stretched for several kilometers, covered with thick plating and rows of massive weapon turrets. Along its surface, bright blue energy lines pulsed as power flowed through its systems. Inside the dreadnought, human crew members moved through wide command halls and engineering chambers. Unlike the nervous atmosphere inside the alien fleet, the humans worked with calm focus. They had trained for this moment for many years. Every officer and technician knew their role perfectly. The central command bridge of the dreadnought was filled with large holographic displays showing the positions of every ship in the system. The captain stood near the main screen while studying the approaching alien fleet. The red symbols representing the Zereth Armada looked numerous, but the captain did not seem worried. A young officer quietly reported that the alien ships were changing formation and preparing for battle. The captain simply nodded. He had expected this reaction. Humanity had hidden its strength for decades, but now there was no reason to hide anymore. He gave a simple command to the fleet. The dreadnoughts would continue forward and engage the enemy near the orbit of Mars. Across the outer solar system, dozens of enormous human warships adjusted their course. Their engines burned with powerful blue light as the giant vessels slowly accelerated toward the inner planets. Each dreadnought moved like a floating fortress, surrounded by smaller escort ships that had also been hidden in secret bases. Back on Earth, the underground command center was now fully active. Officers tracked every movement in space, while civilian leaders watched from secure communication links around the planet. The tension across Earth was growing stronger. People everywhere were following the battle through news broadcasts and satellite feeds. For the first time, humanity was showing the galaxy its true strength. In the command center, the admiral stood silently with his hands behind his back while watching the tactical display. The approaching alien fleet still outnumbered the human forces, but numbers alone did not decide every battle. The dreadnoughts had been designed to fight exactly this kind of enemy. One of the officers reported that the Zereth fleet had launched several groups of fast attack ships to intercept the approaching human vessels. These smaller alien ships were moving ahead of the main fleet, hoping to slow the dreadnoughts before the larger battle began. The admiral listened carefully before giving a quiet response. He ordered the lead dreadnought to continue forward and ignore the enemy scouts. Humanity's fleet would not waste time chasing smaller targets. They would face the main force directly. Hours passed as the distance between the two fleets slowly decreased. The darkness of space between Jupiter and Mars became the stage for the first true confrontation between humanity and the Zereth Dominion. The alien scouts reached the human fleet first. Dozens of small Zereth attack ships raced toward the enormous dreadnoughts, their weapons already charging with red energy. The alien pilots believed speed and numbers would give them an advantage. As the first attack ships moved into range, bright red laser fire streaked across space toward the lead dreadnought. The beams struck the massive armored hull, creating flashes of light across its surface. But when the energy faded, the ship continued moving forward without slowing down. The alien weapons had barely scratched its armor. Inside the dreadnought, the human captain calmly watched the incoming fire reports. The damage was almost non-existent. He gave a single order to the weapons officer. One of the large defense turrets slowly rotated toward the attacking scouts. The weapon fired a short burst of bright blue energy. The blast cut through space and struck several Zereth attack ships at once. The small vessels disappeared in a sudden explosion of light and debris. The remaining alien scouts immediately changed course and retreated, shocked by the power of the single shot. Back in the Zereth flagship, the fleet commander watched the destruction of his scout ships on the tactical display. His expression hardened as the truth became clear. The humans were not bluffing. Their massive warships were real, and their weapons were extremely powerful. The commander slowly turned his attention back to the approaching dreadnought fleet. These giant vessels were still moving forward through space, silent and unstoppable. For the first time since the invasion began, the Zereth officers understood that the battle for Earth would not be easy. The galaxy had believed humanity was weak. But now, in the cold darkness between the planets, the truth was beginning to appear. And the first real battle between the dreadnought fleet and the invading armada was about to begin. The distance between the two fleets slowly disappeared as the battle for the Sol system finally began. The Zereth Dominion fleet formed a massive wall of warships across the darkness near the orbit of Mars. Thousands of alien vessels moved into organized combat formations, their weapons glowing with deep red energy as they prepared to fire. The commanders inside the fleet knew they were no longer facing a weak and helpless world. The enormous human dreadnoughts moving toward them had already proven that humanity possessed far greater power than anyone in the galaxy had expected. But the Zereth Dominion was still one of the strongest military forces in known space. Their fleets had destroyed powerful civilizations before. They had no intention of turning back now. Inside the Zereth flagship, the fleet commander studied the tactical display carefully. The human dreadnought fleet was still smaller in number compared to the Dominion Armada, but the size and power of each ship made them extremely dangerous. The commander understood that the only way to defeat such large vessels was through overwhelming force. He raised one armored hand and gave a clear order to the fleet. Every available weapon would fire at once. The Dominion ships immediately obeyed. Across the alien armada, thousands of weapon systems powered up. Massive plasma cannons glowed with red energy. Long-range missile launchers opened along the sides of cruisers and battleships. Energy beams charged along rows of heavy laser batteries. Then, in a single moment, the entire fleet opened fire. A storm of red light exploded across space. Thousands of beams and missiles rushed toward the approaching human dreadnoughts. The attack was powerful enough to destroy entire fleets. If the human ships were as fragile as normal warships, the battle would end in seconds. The alien commanders watched the attack carefully as their weapons struck the lead dreadnought. The enormous ship was surrounded by explosions as plasma blasts and missiles slammed into its hull. For several seconds, the vessel disappeared inside a cloud of fire and energy. Many Zereth officers believed the attack had worked. But when the explosions slowly faded, the giant warship was still there. The dreadnought continued moving forward through space exactly as it had before. Its massive hull showed only minor damage, and its powerful shield systems had absorbed most of the attack. Silence spread across the Zereth command bridge. Their strongest weapons had barely slowed the human vessel. Back on the lead dreadnought, the human crew calmly reviewed the damage reports. The ship's armor had taken only small impacts, and the shield generators were still operating at full strength. The captain watched the incoming alien fleet on the main display with quiet focus. He knew this moment would define the battle. He gave a short command to the weapons officer. The dreadnought would return fire. Deep inside the enormous ship, massive energy reactors pushed power into the main weapon system. Along the front of the dreadnought, a huge cannon slowly charged with brilliant blue energy. The weapon had been designed specifically for large fleet engagements. It required enormous power, but its destructive ability was unlike anything most civilizations had ever seen. The weapon reached full charge within seconds. Then the captain gave the order to fire. A blinding beam of blue energy shot across the battlefield. The powerful blast traveled through space faster than most ships could react. It struck the front line of the Zereth fleet and continued forward, cutting through multiple warships in a straight line. Several alien cruisers were destroyed instantly, their hulls breaking apart in violent explosions. Two larger battleships were hit seconds later, their shields collapsing under the overwhelming energy. Debris and burning fragments scattered across space as the beam finally faded. The entire alien formation had been torn apart by a single shot. Shock filled the Zereth command bridge as officers watched the destruction appear on their displays. One human dreadnought had destroyed multiple warships with a single weapon. The fleet commander remained silent while studying the new battlefield map. The human ships were still moving closer, and now more dreadnoughts were joining the fight. Dozens of enormous vessels were entering the combat zone from different directions. The Zereth fleet suddenly realized they were facing an enemy far stronger than expected. Back near the human formation, the rest of the dreadnought fleet began activating their own weapons. Massive turret batteries rotated along their armored hulls. Long energy cannons charged with bright blue light. Smaller escort ships moved into defensive positions around the giant warships. The battlefield quickly filled with flashes of energy as the human fleet joined the fight. Blue beams from dreadnought cannons struck alien ships across the formation. Every shot carried enough power to cripple or destroy enemy vessels. The Zereth fleet fought back with equal determination. Thousands of alien weapons fired again, filling space with red light and missile trails. Explosions appeared across the battlefield as ships from both sides exchanged heavy fire. Several smaller human escort vessels were damaged and forced to retreat, but the dreadnoughts continued advancing without slowing down. Their thick armor and powerful shields allowed them to absorb massive amounts of damage. Inside the underground command center on Earth, human officers watched the battle unfold on the giant display screens. The scale of the fight was enormous. Hundreds of warships were exchanging fire across millions of kilometers of space. The admiral studied the battle carefully while reports continued arriving from the front lines. The dreadnought fleet was performing exactly as expected. Their weapons were overwhelming the enemy ships one by one. But the Zereth Dominion still had a large fleet. The battle was far from over. Back in space, the lead dreadnought fired its main cannon again. Another brilliant beam crossed the battlefield, striking the center of the alien formation. A large Dominion carrier was destroyed instantly, along with several nearby escorts. The remaining alien ships began shifting their formation, trying to surround the slower dreadnoughts and attack them from multiple directions. The Zereth commander knew that direct attacks were failing. If the Dominion fleet wanted to survive, they would need to change their strategy quickly. But as he studied the tactical display, something else became clear. More human dreadnoughts were arriving from the outer system. The number of massive blue markers on the map continued to grow. Humanity had not sent their entire fleet yet. The ships already fighting were only the first wave. The Zereth officers slowly realized the terrible truth. The humans had been preparing for this war for a very long time, and the dreadnought fleet defending Earth was far larger than anyone in the galaxy had imagined. The battle was only beginning, but the confidence of the invading fleet was already fading. The empire that had once laughed at Earth's weakness was now fighting for survival against the hidden power of humanity. The battlefield near Mars had become a storm of fire and light. Thousands of alien warships and massive human dreadnoughts filled the darkness of space. Red and blue beams crossed the void as both fleets fought with everything they had. Explosions flashed across the battlefield as damaged ships drifted away or broke apart under heavy fire. What had begun as a confident invasion was now turning into a desperate struggle for the Zereth Dominion. The alien commanders quickly realized that the human dreadnoughts were far stronger than they had imagined. Each one was like a moving fortress. Their armor absorbed huge amounts of damage, and their shields continued to hold even under constant attack. Every time a dreadnought fired its main weapons, another alien warship disappeared from the battlefield. Inside the Zereth flagship, tension filled the command bridge. Officers moved quickly between their stations while alarms sounded across the room. The tactical display showed more and more red markers disappearing every minute. Several cruisers and battleships had already been destroyed, and others were heavily damaged. The fleet commander stared at the display with narrowed eyes. For the first time since the invasion began, he understood how badly they had underestimated humanity. The humans had hidden their power for decades, building an entire fleet of warships that rivaled the greatest empires in the galaxy. But the Zereth commander was not ready to accept defeat. He quickly gave new orders across the fleet. The Dominion ships would stop attacking the dreadnoughts one by one. Instead, they would concentrate their fire on a single target. If enough ships attacked the same dreadnought at once, they might finally break through its defenses. The new strategy spread quickly through the alien formation. Hundreds of Zereth warships began focusing their weapons on the lead human dreadnought. Plasma cannons and heavy lasers charged again as missile launchers prepared another massive strike. Moments later, the fleet fired together. A second storm of red energy rushed toward the same human vessel. The enormous dreadnought was surrounded by a bright cloud of explosions as the attacks slammed into its shields. The pressure was stronger than before. Even the powerful defense systems of the dreadnought struggled against such concentrated fire. Inside the ship, warning lights flashed as the crew monitored the shield generators. The captain remained calm while reading the reports from engineering. The shields were weakening, but they were still holding. He calmly ordered the ship to maintain its course. Then he gave another command that had been waiting for this moment. The dreadnought activated its secondary weapon systems. Along the sides of the giant vessel, dozens of heavy turret cannons rotated toward the attacking alien ships. Blue energy built up inside each weapon as they prepared to fire. When a captain gave the signal, the dreadnought unleashed a wave of defensive fire across the battlefield. Bright blue beams shot out in every direction. Several Zereth cruisers were struck immediately, their hulls breaking apart under the powerful blasts. Smaller alien ships were destroyed almost instantly when the beams touched them. Even large battleships struggled to survive the repeated hits. The alien fleet had hoped to destroy one dreadnought with overwhelming force, but the human ship answered with devastating firepower. Nearby human dreadnoughts quickly joined the attack. Their massive cannons began firing again, sending long beams of blue energy across the battlefield. Each shot tore through the alien formation, leaving broken ships and drifting wreckage behind. The balance of the battle was beginning to change. Back on Earth, people everywhere watched the fight through live transmissions from military satellites. Cities, towns, and homes across the planet were filled with silent viewers staring at screens. At the beginning of the invasion, many people had feared the worst. The alien fleet looked unstoppable when it first appeared in the solar system. But now the images from space were telling a very different story. Humanity was fighting back, and their hidden fleet was proving stronger than anyone had expected. In the underground command center, the admiral carefully studied the latest reports. More dreadnoughts were now arriving from the outer system. Ships that had been hidden near Saturn and even farther away were finally joining the battle. The number of human warships in the combat zone continued to grow every minute. One officer quietly reported that the Zereth fleet had already lost nearly a third of its ships. Another officer confirmed that many of the surviving alien vessels were beginning to retreat toward the outer battlefield edges. The admiral nodded slowly. The Zereth Dominion had entered the solar system believing Earth was weak and easy to conquer. Now, they were discovering the truth. Humanity had never been defenseless. Back in space, the battlefield continued to burn with energy and explosions. The dreadnought fleet pushed steadily forward, forcing the alien armada to fall back step by step. Wherever the giant human ships moved, the Zereth fleet was forced to retreat or risk destruction. Inside the Zereth flagship, the commander watched the situation becoming worse. More and more human dreadnoughts were appearing on the tactical display. Their fleet was growing larger while the Dominion forces were shrinking. For the first time, doubt spread through the alien command crew. One officer carefully suggested that the fleet should withdraw and request reinforcements from the Dominion homeworlds. The commander did not answer immediately. He continued studying the battlefield in silence. Finally, he understood the terrible mistake his empire had made. They had believed humanity was a young and weak species. They had believed Earth was unprotected. But the truth was now impossible to ignore. Humanity had spent generations preparing for exactly this kind of invasion. The Dreadnought fleet was not just a defense force. It was a warning to the entire galaxy. A warning that Earth would never be an easy target. Outside the flagship, the human dreadnoughts continued their steady advance through the battlefield. Their weapons fired again and again, pushing the alien fleet farther away from the inner planets. The Zereth invasion was slowly collapsing under the weight of humanity's hidden strength. The galaxy had once laughed at the idea of Earth defending itself. Now, as the massive dreadnought fleet moved forward through the wreckage of war, the truth was becoming clear to everyone watching. Humanity was not weak. Humanity had simply been waiting. The battle in the Sol system had turned completely against the Zereth Dominion. What had once been a confident invasion fleet was now a scattered force struggling to survive. Burning wreckage drifted through the darkness near the orbit of Mars. Broken ships and damaged cruisers slowly spun through space as the sounds of war continued across the battlefield. Blue beams from human dreadnought cannons still flashed through the void, while smaller human escort ships moved carefully between the giant vessels. The once powerful alien armada was slowly being pushed farther away from the inner planets. Inside the Zereth flagship, the atmosphere on the command bridge had changed completely. At the beginning of the invasion, the officers had been calm and confident. Now tension and frustration filled the room. Warning lights blinked across the control panels as new reports continued arriving from the battlefield. The tactical display in the center of the bridge showed the terrible truth. Nearly half of the Dominion fleet had already been destroyed or heavily damaged. Several large battleships had been lost, and many cruisers were no longer able to fight. The fleet commander stood silently while studying the display. His armored hands were tightly crossed behind his back as he watched the blue symbols representing the human dreadnoughts slowly surround the remaining Dominion ships. The humans were not rushing the attack. Instead, they were advancing carefully, closing every possible escape route. One of the alien officers finally spoke with a nervous voice. He suggested that the fleet should retreat from the Sol system immediately. If they stayed any longer, the remaining ships might be completely destroyed. Other officers quickly agreed. The battle had already become far more dangerous than expected. Reinforcements from the Dominion homeworlds were still far away, and the human fleet continued to grow stronger every minute. The commander listened quietly while his officers argued. For the first time since the invasion began, the idea of retreat no longer sounded like weakness. It sounded like survival. At the same time, the human dreadnought fleet continued its steady advance through space. The giant warships moved like silent mountains, their massive engines glowing with bright blue energy. Around them, smaller human escort vessels protected the larger ships while scanning the battlefield for threats. Inside the lead dreadnought, the captain watched the alien fleet carefully. The tactical display showed that many Zereth ships were beginning to break formation. Some were already turning away from the battle and moving toward the outer solar system. The captain understood what this meant. The invasion fleet was starting to panic. But the human fleet could not allow the enemy to escape too easily. The captain calmly issued new orders across the dreadnought formation. Several ships would move to block the most direct escape routes. Others would continue attacking the remaining alien vessels to force them farther away from Earth. The goal was not only to defeat the invasion fleet, but to make sure the Zereth Dominion understood the cost of attacking humanity. Far below on Earth, billions of people continued watching the battle through satellite broadcasts. The entire planet had become united in silence as they followed the fight unfolding across space. Earlier that day, many people had feared that the alien fleet would destroy Earth. Now, those same viewers were watching humanity push the invaders out of the solar system. In cities across the world, crowds gathered in public places where giant screens showed the battle live. Each time a human dreadnought fired its massive weapons and destroyed another alien ship, cheers spread through the watching crowds. The fear that had once filled the planet was slowly being replaced by pride and relief. In the underground command center, the Admiral continued observing the battle with careful attention. Reports from the dreadnought captains showed that the Zereth fleet was losing coordination. Their formations were breaking apart as individual ships tried to escape the battlefield. The Admiral knew that the final stage of the battle had begun. He turned to one of the officers and gave a quiet order. The human fleet would begin the containment maneuver. Across the battlefield, several dreadnoughts changed course and moved to intercept the retreating alien ships. Their enormous engines pushed them forward while their weapon systems prepared for another round of fire. The remaining Zereth vessels soon discovered that their escape paths were closing. Wherever they tried to move, another giant human warship appeared in their path. Inside the Zereth flagship, the commander watched the situation becoming impossible. The human dreadnoughts were slowly surrounding what remained of the Dominion fleet. If they waited any longer, retreat would no longer be possible. Finally, the commander made his decision. He gave the order that every officer on the bridge had been expecting but hoping to avoid. The Zereth Dominion fleet would retreat from the Sol system. The command spread quickly across the alien ships. Engines powered up as the surviving vessels turned away from the battlefield and accelerated toward the outer system. Some ships attempted to cover the retreat by firing their weapons at the approaching dreadnoughts, but the attacks had little effect. The human fleet continued advancing without slowing down. Several retreating alien ships were struck by long-range dreadnought cannons and destroyed before they could escape. Others managed to jump into faster-than-light travel and disappear into deep space. The once powerful invasion fleet was now fleeing in defeat. From the bridge of the lead dreadnought, the human captain watched the retreating enemy ships carefully. He did not order his fleet to chase them beyond the edge of the solar system. The message had already been delivered. Humanity had defended its home and defeated one of the strongest empires in the galaxy. Back on Earth, the Admiral finally allowed himself a small nod of satisfaction. The Zereth Dominion had come to conquer a world they believed was weak and unprotected. Instead, they had discovered the hidden strength of humanity. The battle for Earth was ending, and the galaxy would soon learn what had happened in the Sol system. The empire that once mocked humanity had been forced to run, and the legend of the human dreadnought fleet was only beginning. The last Zereth ships disappeared into faster-than-light travel, leaving the battlefield silent for the first time since the invasion began. The cold darkness around Mars was now filled with drifting wreckage, broken warships, and fading energy trails from thousands of weapons that had fired during the battle. Pieces of destroyed cruisers slowly rotated through space while emergency signals from damaged vessels echoed across the communication channels. The great invasion fleet that had once marched confidently toward Earth had been shattered. The massive human dreadnoughts remained in position across the battlefield like silent guardians. Their engines glowed softly as they held formation, scanning the surrounding space for any sign that the enemy might return. Smaller human escort ships moved carefully between the drifting wreckage, searching for survivors and collecting valuable battlefield data. Inside the lead dreadnought, the captain stood on the command bridge while reviewing the final battle reports. The human fleet had suffered damage, but the losses were far smaller than anyone had feared when the invasion first began. Several escort ships were destroyed, and a few dreadnoughts had taken heavy impacts to their armor, but the core fleet remained strong. The captain quietly thanked his crew for their discipline and courage during the fight. They had faced one of the strongest military powers in the galaxy and forced it to retreat. That was something few civilizations could ever claim. Across the solar system, human communication networks quickly spread the news. The Zereth Dominion fleet had retreated. Earth was safe. On the surface of the planet, the reaction was immediate. Cities around the world erupted in celebration as people realized the danger had passed. In large public squares and crowded streets, millions of people cheered while watching the final battle images on giant screens. Earlier that day, the future of humanity had looked uncertain. Now hope and pride filled the planet. Humanity had defended its home against an empire that once believed Earth was helpless. In the underground command center, the Admiral finally allowed himself to sit down after many long hours of standing beside the tactical display. The officers around him continued monitoring the situation in space, but the tension that had once filled the room had slowly faded. The worst part of the battle was over. One young officer looked at the large holographic display where the remaining Dreadnought fleet still held position near Mars. The officer quietly said that the galaxy would never see humanity the same way again. The Admiral nodded slowly. For many decades, human leaders had made the difficult decision to hide their true strength. They allowed other civilizations to believe Earth was weak because that illusion kept dangerous empires from attacking too early. But now the secret was no longer hidden. The galaxy had seen the power of the Dreadnought fleet. News of the battle would spread quickly through every star system connected to the Galactic Council. Other civilizations would study the reports carefully. They would learn how a young species from a small blue planet had defeated a powerful invasion force. Far away beyond the Sol system, the surviving Zereth ships continued their long retreat through deep space. Many of the vessels were damaged and scarred from the battle. Entire sections of the fleet were missing. The commanders aboard the flagship knew that when they returned to their empire, they would have to explain what had happened. The Dominion had attacked Earth expecting an easy victory. Instead, they had discovered a hidden military power capable of destroying fleets many times larger than its own. The defeat would shock the leadership of the Empire and force them to reconsider everything they believed about humanity. Back in the Sol system, the human Dreadnought fleet slowly began reorganizing after the battle. Several ships moved closer to Mars, while others returned to positions around Jupiter and Saturn. Although the invasion had ended, the fleet would remain active. Humanity had learned that the galaxy could be dangerous, and they would not allow another surprise attack to threaten their home. Inside the lead Dreadnought, the captain received a new message from Earth Command. The Admiral personally thanked the fleet for their service and confirmed that the operation had been a success. The Dreadnought fleet had protected the planet exactly as it was designed to do. The captain looked through the wide observation window of the bridge at the distant stars. Somewhere out there were countless alien civilizations watching and learning about what had just happened. For years, humanity had been seen as a small and inexperienced species. That image had now changed forever. Weeks later, the story of the battle reached the chambers of the Galactic Council. Representatives from dozens of alien civilizations gathered to discuss the shocking reports arriving from the Sol system. The same council chamber that once laughed at the idea of humanity defending itself was now filled with quiet whispers and serious expressions. Detailed recordings from the battle were displayed on the giant central screen. The images showed enormous human dreadnoughts emerging from the shadows of Jupiter, their massive weapons destroying ship after ship of the invading fleet. Some council members watched in stunned silence as they realized the scale of humanity's hidden strength. One representative finally spoke what many others were thinking. Humanity had spent decades pretending to be weak while secretly building one of the most powerful defensive fleets in the galaxy. That kind of patience and planning was something few species could achieve. Another council member quietly added that the defeat of the Zereth Dominion would change the balance of power across known space. Empires that once ignored Earth would now think very carefully before threatening humanity again. Back on Earth, the Admiral stood alone in the quiet command center after most of the officers had left. The great tactical display now showed peaceful space once again. The enemy fleet was gone, and the dreadnoughts were returning to their silent watch across the solar system. The Admiral looked at the glowing blue planet on the screen and allowed himself a small smile. Humanity had faced its first true test against a galactic empire and survived. But he also knew something important. The galaxy was vast, and many other powerful civilizations still existed beyond the distant stars. One day, another empire might decide to test Earth's strength again. But next time the galaxy would remember what happened when the Zereth Dominion tried to conquer humanity. They would remember the moment when the dreadnought fleet awakened and the small blue planet proved it was never defenseless.